Hello there everyone, and welcome back to Void Dwarf Studios, where for our Warhammer Wednesday, we're going to explore a faction that's recently gotten a bunch of new releases and updates. These are the Elves of the bright as wall white light of Hysh, the Lumineth Realm Lords. Now, as I've said, these very interesting new Elven additions to Warhammer Age of Sigmar have got a lot of new toys coming out, and I would be remiss if I didn't go over all of them in their entirety, so I'm going to start off with the standard overview, telling you the history of the Lumineth, how they rose, how they fell, how they have decided to try and push their influences out to the other realms, and why Teclis, in the Broken Realms books, is deciding to pick a fight with Nagash. So let's start with a little bit of geography, just so you know roughly where we are, as Age of Sigmar's realms are a little confusing. The realm of Hysh is one of the 9 realms, situated next to the realm of Shadow, ironically enough, and in between the two is the prison that Slaanesh has been kept in all this time. Now, I've talked about Slaanesh before, so I'm not going to go too far into it, but as this is effectively High Elves, or Light Elves, Slaanesh does pop in every now and again to, well, shake their very foundations. As for the High Elves back in the old world, Slaanesh had a very dramatic influence on their culture, and well, when you've been an elven soul living inside of a manifestation of Chaos's stomach, there are undoubtedly going to be some scars on your psyche. Yet another thing that Age of Sigmar can thank Morathi for, because she just likes to ruin it for everyone. So as I was saying, in the realm of light, back in the Age of Myth, the gods Malerion, Teclis, Tyrion, and Morathi chose to trap Slaanesh in this little pocket dimension just between the two. And it was thanks to these elves that Slaanesh as a chaos deity was essentially nullified for a good chunk of the Age of Sigmar history, and this is where most elven souls, well, come from in Age of Sigmar. And they created the elven races as we know today. These, of course, being the initial attempt, which were the Sylvaneth Deepkin, which Teclis felt were a complete failure and so tried to destroy them, with only Tyrion staying his hand, allowing them to flee to the deepest parts of the ocean, Morathi getting her hands on the elven souls who had been mostly female and mostly inclined towards her murderous nature, and finally the last group were the elven souls that had been inside Slaanesh the least amount of time. These were the most sane and stable souls, henceforth being known as the Lumineth. Populating the now realm of Hysh, Teclis and Tyrion managed to find a way so that even if an elven soul dies, their soul which was bound to Slaanesh does not go back there and instead allows them to reincarnate. This, for Teclis and Tyrion, was a clean start for their memories of the High Elven race that was, and Teclis and Tyrion were going to make damn sure that they did not repeat the same mistakes of the past. And the Lumineth, with these two twin gods, decided to create a society that was set on the path of bettering itself. Hysh itself was a world of light, of symmetry, of vast open spaces and complex magics. Frankly, heaven for an elf. The only exception to this was a landscape known as Hyxia, a mind-searing landscape that confuses and distorts the mind and can often lead one down dark thoughts. However, for the rest of Hysh and those who lived in it, the elves sought to conquer all aspects of their minds and bodies. They learned how to project their spirits, they learned how to travel the land, study magic, cartography, history, and they learned to live in relative peace and tranquility with the various creatures around them. Now, don't take this to mean that Hysh was a peaceful place, it most certainly wasn't. But the Lumineth found, with their ability to commune with the spiritual elements of the land, with their new mental disciplines, and their incredible aptitude for magic, that these challenges were relatively straightforward to circumvent, and their peaceful approaches and calm demeanour allowed them to avoid most conflicts. I'm not saying that the elves were wusses, but far from it. They were also very interested in perfecting their martial skills. It's just that these elves were not quick to anger. The Lumineth cities, castles and citadels were places of incredible beauty, ambitious architecture, and the elves themselves were seeking to project further the light of Hysh. And in the beginning, the elves had friendly rivalries, particularly amongst the scholars and wizards, all wanting to learn newer and more sophisticated forms of knowledge. And this was formalized under a system known as the Teklemetria, or Teklian ladder. Each rung of this ladder essentially showed your level of mastery over a particular aspect of life or study. Those who grew more powerful in their particular study often began to exude their own light, much like the light that shines around the realm of Hysh. But all started to go wrong once the elves discovered their unique realm's magical product, known as ether quartz. Ether quartz are, well, drugs. Simplistically speaking, ether quartz were a kind of drug that the Lumineth got addicted to. This stuff allows them to temporarily increase their physical and arcane prowess, although this tends to have a heavy cost on the subject's psyche. And the competition for getting a hold of this stuff grew fiercer and fiercer as, well, pockets of this stuff is relatively hard to come by. And those who took more and more of it began to have side effects, shall we say. They wouldn't sleep, they began to stop eating, and over time these initial friendly rivalries began to become more insidious, and it began to cause the elves to become more prideful like their old world counterparts. Supercharged as they were by the incredible intoxicating effects of this stuff, this led to the elves becoming a bit more backstabby, a bit more interested in sabotage and skullduggery and, well, the kind of antics that their ancestors used to get involved in and that Teclis and Tyrion were really not happy with them starting to do. And oh so soon, thanks to the newer increased levels of pride, arrogance and lust for knowledge, the Whispers of Slaanesh, still trapped in its prison, were able to lead these elves down destructive and self-deprecating paths. Tyrion and Teclis were unaware of these acts that their children were committing, and whilst they were busy, the Lumineth started to learn demonology and started using them as tools for undermining their rivals. Very soon afterwards, open warfare and killing was becoming a daily norm. The magical cataclysm that eventually followed was known as the Spiral Fall, where reality itself was almost ripped apart into the realm of chaos, and Slaanesh demons came pouring in. Those that remained level-headed enough managed to fight back under Tyrion's martial genius, and the Lumineth civil war that devastated most of Hysh was eventually put down, although the landscape was harmed greatly in the process. Whilst Tyrion was helping to lead the defence, Teclis was missing. He was meditating in the wilderness of Helexia and refused to come out of it, his mind travelling through the etheric void and coming face to face with a new entity. This entity known as an Elementor, known as Selenar, a spirit of Hysh's true moon. Selenar, who recognised a kindred spirit in Teclis's quest for knowledge and peace, together managed to gather the most repentant and selfless of the Lumineth and created a bond and the various elements that were bound to the Hysh's landscape. These individuals were the founders of the Elementari temples, and it was Teclis who chose to lead them down this new path of magic. However, the Lumineth themselves were left scarred and seriously harmed by this both spiritual and psychological and physical fight with the demons of chaos. And because of this long and bloody war, this is what kept them busy and away from the war that was happening in the rest of the realms, where Sigmar and his Stormcast Eternals were starting to turn back the tides of chaos. In order to avoid this catastrophe happening again with the Ether Quartz, Teclis taught the elves to use it in a different way. Instead of using it to just enhance their bodies, minds and spirits, the elves use it more sparingly, and whilst they are aware of the fact that it drains them of their ability to feel emotion, they feel that this is a price worth paying to allow them to prevent themselves from becoming so easily influenced by Slaanesh, using it in this new way to remove their emotions instead of stoking them. If this is going to come back and bite them in the arse on a later date, the jury's still out on that one, and it is only now in relatively recent times that the Aelves of Hysh have decided to come and aid the rest of the realms in retaking it from chaos. And when Slaanesh finally got loosed, this for Teclis was the final sign that they could not remain isolated in their realm anymore, and must take the fight back to the forces of chaos. And having marshalled the various armies, the Lumineth went forth to ally themselves with the forces of order in the Age of Sigmar realm. In more recent times as well, Nagash did his whole Necroquake shenanigan, and that severely upset Teclis, who was in no mood to have the Pantheon disrupted again because of Nagash's interference. That and, well, Nagash is just a danger to everything that's alive anyway, him being the god of death and all. So Teclis in the Broken Realm series has taken it upon himself to deal with Nagash personally. Now, obviously, this is a franchise at the end of the day. Nagash isn't going to die, but it would be interesting to see the consequences of Teclis' actions. And also, we haven't seen or heard anything really from Tyrion since the Elven Civil War. He has become surprisingly hard to find, and there's not an awful lot of information on him, and he doesn't have a model either. So, that is the overview and the current history for the Lumineth Realm Lords. A very well trained, disciplined, highly skilled army that has a little bit of a drug addiction but also has awesome elemental magics. Right now we've got elements of earth, we've got elements of wind, and I'm just waiting for some fire and water elemental stuff to start happening, because the new models that are coming out for Lumineth are pretty creations. Although I have to say my personal favourite is their new floating temple with the waterfall. That's just gorgeous. I hope you look forward to the next video, and until next time everyone, take care.